Hey, how's it going, guys? Today, I'm going to be telling you who the all-time best player is for each NBA franchise. And going in alphabetical order, we're going to start off with Atlanta Hawks. And this one's really between Trae Young, a talented young player, but he's not quite there yet to be put over the other two guys. Dikembe Mutombo, a very good defender, and Dominique Wilkins, a dominant force back in the 90s. And all these guys are great players, but I gotta give it to Dominique because of his unstoppable dunking package.
Dominique Wilkins with a reverse slam.
Dominique is unbelievable.
Now moving on to the Boston Celtics. This one's between two players, Larry Bird and Bill Russell. But let's be real, it's Bill Russell, because if it wasn't for him getting 11 championships, this franchise would just be amateur. Now to the Brooklyn Nets. And we got Dr. J, one of the all-time greats and one of the most iconic players ever, and Jason Kidd, one of the players with the highest IQs. And in terms of who's done the most for the franchise, I'm going to have to give it to Jason Kidd, even though he's not the better player. And I can also see Kevin Durant becoming a franchise player in the future as long as he sticks with the team. Okay, now moving on to the Charlotte Hornets, we're going to have to give it to Kemba Walker. Mainly because there's just not that much competition in Charlotte. But don't get me wrong, he's still a great player, but in the terms of being a franchise player, he's just not the best out there. And speaking of not being the best out there, we got the complete opposite with the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan. And that should speak for itself. And speaking of speaking for itself, with the Cleveland Cavaliers, we got the king, LeBron James.
And, Cleveland! This is for you!
Okay, now moving on to the Dallas Mavericks. I got Dirk Nowitzki, of course. But I can also see Luka Doncic potentially becoming the all-time franchise player. But he would have to stay with the Mavs for 20 plus seasons and also getting multiple championships. So I think this one's definitely yours, Dirk. Okay, now to the Denver Nuggets. We got Dikembe Mutombo, a great defender, but his best days were with the Hawks. Carmelo Anthony, an MVP-like player back in Denver, and Alex English. And not a lot of people know him, but he averaged 30 plus points per game back in the day. And this one's tough, but I'm going to have to give it to English. Okay, now coming up next with the Detroit Pistons, I got the bad boy, Isaiah Thomas. But I can also see you saying Ben Wallace, but not really. This is more Isaiah Thomas' team, even though I dislike the guy.
I think the greeting is for the Pistons as they are headed off as time runs down. Pistons wasting no time in getting out of here.
Okay, now moving on to the Golden State Warriors. This one's between Steph Curry, the best three-point shooter of all time, Kevin Durant, the biggest snake of all time, and Will Chamberlain, the best scorer of all time. And this one's really tough, but I think I'm going to give it to Steph Curry because if it wasn't for him, I don't think this franchise would be where it's at right now. So, there you go, Steph. Now moving on to the Houston Rockets, we got Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon, one of the best players of all time, and James Harden, a scoring machine. And out of these two guys, Hakeem Olajuwon is not just a better player, but also the one that done the most for this franchise by getting multiple championships. So sorry, James, but this is Hakeem's team. And now to the Indiana Pacers. We got Reggie Miller, one of the best three-point shooters of all time during a difficult era of basketball, and Paul George, a good shooting guard. And honestly, if Paul George stayed with Indiana Pacers and didn't get injured, I think this would be his team. But that's not the case, so it's Reggie's. And now moving on to the Los Angeles Clippers. And it's either between Blake Griffin, one of the best dunkers of all time, Chris Paul, a great ball handler, or Kawhi Leonard. And to be honest, in his one season with the Clippers, I think he's done more for the franchise than Blake Griffin or Chris Paul has done. It's kind of sad, but it's Kawhi's team. And now to my team, the Los Angeles Lakers. And it's either between Magic Johnson or Kobe Bryant. And honestly, even then, it's even hard because so many people have played for this franchise. But since I'm a Laker fan, I'm going to make the executive decision and say that it's Kobe Bryant. Now to the Memphis Grizzlies. We either got Marc Gasol or his brother Pau Gasol, but his best years were with the Lakers. So, other than that, basically no competition. Oh, wait. Oh, John Morant. But he's kind of only a rookie, but I might as well give it to Ja. And now up next is Miami Heat. This one's either between LeBron James, and he wasn't with the franchise for too long, but he did leave a major impact. Or Dwayne Wade, and he was with the franchise much longer and started their success. And if this was in terms of who's the better player, this would easily be LeBron James. But in terms of who did the most for their franchise, this has got to be Dwayne Wade, hands down. Up next with the Milwaukee Bucks, I'm going to give it to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar because he's not only the best player that came through this franchise, but he also gave the most to this franchise by giving them a championship. But I can also see Giannis Antetokounmpo becoming the franchise player in the future as long as he gets multiple championships. Then, yeah. Now with the Minnesota Timberwolves, we either got Kevin Garnett, a great defender with great heart, or Kevin Love, a great shooter. But between the two, I'm probably going to give it to Kevin Garnett, just because he helps on both sides of the court. Now to the New Orleans Pelicans. We either got Anthony Davis, an all-around great player, but mainly a good defender, or Chris Paul in his prime. So between AD and CP3, I think I'm going to give it to CP3, just because AD didn't stay with the Pelicans that long. Sorry, AD. Now moving on to the New York Knicks. We either got Carmelo Anthony, a great player, Patrick Ewing, probably the best player out of all these three, or Walt Frazier, the one that got a championship for this franchise. But in terms of who done the most for this franchise, I think I'm going to have to give it to Patrick Ewing, because he represented the franchise by going on the Dream Team. Sorry, Walt Frazier. Now the Oklahoma City Thunder, and this one's either Russell Westbrook, the Mr. Triple-Double, or Kevin Durant, the guy that left the Thunder just to get a title. So this one's pretty obvious. It's Russell Westbrook's team.
That is going to do it. Russell Westbrook's.
Now the Orlando Magic, and this one's either Shaquille O'Neal, but he was only with the franchise for 4 seasons, or Dwight Howard in his prime. So I'm going to have to give it to Dwight Howard because he did better in Orlando. And now moving on to the Philadelphia 76ers. This one's either between Dr. J, and he got a championship for the franchise, or Allen Iverson, arguably the better player, and he's definitely the more iconic one of the two. So, because of those reasons, I'm going to have to give it to AI. Now to the Phoenix Suns, and this one's between Steve Nash, an MVP-like player in Phoenix, or Charles Barkley, also an MVP-like player, but he did it during a harder time, and also was on the Dream Team, so I'm going to have to give it to my man Chuck. Now the Portland Trail Blazers. This one's either between Damian Lillard, one of the best scorers of all time, and Clyde the Glide Drexler, one of the best slashers of all time. But since I think Damian Lillard will probably do more for this franchise, I'm going to give the edge to Damian.
Series. It's Lillard. He got the shot off. Lillard,
Now for the Sacramento Kings. We got Chris Webber, the best King of all time, and Oscar Robertson, the best Royal of all time. But since the franchises are technically the same, I'm going to give it to the Big O. Now up next, we got the San Antonio Spurs. And for this one, we got Tim Duncan. End of story. Now the Toronto Raptors. And this one's between Vince Carter, one of the most iconic players of all time, and Kawhi Leonard, the guy that came to the Raptors, got a championship, and left. So in terms of who's done the most for this franchise, I'm going to have to give it to Vince Carter, because when you think of the Raptors, you think of Vince.
All right, Vince Carter with his first on the final round.
Ladies, wait, time out.
And now the Utah Jazz. And this one we got Donovan Mitchell, a good young player, but not as good as the other two guys, which are John Stockton, one of the best point guards of all time, and Karl Malone, one of the best scorers of all time. So this one's not really competition. It's obviously Karl Malone, so there you go, man. And now last but certainly not least, we got the Washington Wizards. And this one's between Gilbert Arenas, a great scorer back in the 90s, John Wall, an all-around great player, and Wes Unseld, and he got a championship for the franchise back in the day. And this one's tough, but I think I'm going to give it to Gilbert Arenas. But I can also see it any other way, but it's too late.
Make his move with 5, down to 4, takes a glance with 3 to 2 for the winner.
Thank you for watching my video. Make sure to comment down below what your franchise leader is and subscribe. Bye.